Hello, everyone, and welcome to Vale of Hearts, a place where love finds its way through the quietest corners of the soul. They met the night everything went wrong, the night she should have died, and he should have stayed invisible. Evelyn Hart was used to being in control of her company, her image, her perfectly calculated life, but control meant nothing when a man she'd never seen before grabbed her by the wrist and whispered, "Don't move." The bullet shattered the glass behind her. The crowd screamed, and for one impossible heartbeat, she felt his arm around her, steady, protective, almost familiar. Hours later, she would remember the smell of gunpowder and coffee on his shirt. The way his voice trembled when he said her name, though she'd never told him what it was. And she would wonder, not who tried to kill her, but how that stranger already knew she'd be the target. The Grand Aurora's ballroom burned with light. Chandeliers scattered fractured gold across tuxedos and satin. Camera flashes stitched the air into a staccato. Evelyn Hart moved through it all like a practiced fact. Measured steps, a smile that had been tested and approved 1,000 times, an expression built for headlines. Tonight the press called her triumphant. Tonight the room belonged to her. She could hear the orchestra without listening to it. She could feel the rehearsed heat of 50 conversations. Success left a residue. She had learned to ignore it. Her white satin gown clung at one shoulder, the cut precise, immaculate. She was, by every account, the woman who had turned a grief-soaked inheritance into a pharmaceutical empire, who could make the stock price jump with a single quarterly call. She was used to being watched. She was less used to being afraid. Behind the stage, in the service corridor, the air smelled of coffee and floor cleaner. Julian Ward carried a silver tray as if it were a rifle, precise, balanced, unbothered. Serving was a job. Surviving was his real work. He had 2 shifts and a stack of medical bills and a daughter who took her breath on a timetable. He had traded one life for another. He wore his restraint like armor. He saw the man in the press pit before anyone else did. Gray suit, camera held steady at eye level. The kind of steady that comes from practice. Practice in killing. The scar beneath the left eye cut through the glow of the chandelier. Julian had seen it in a scope 7 years ago in a place where dawn smelled like cordite and sand. Lars Kincaid. For a second, everything recalibrated. The music, the flashes, the laughter, reduced to background noise. Julian's shoulders found a narrower, older posture. The calm that came then wasn't peace. It was the familiar silence that spreads when a trigger is about to be pulled. No one panicked. Not yet. Julian didn't have the luxury of panic. He had 3 crucial seconds. He crossed the ballroom in the small, efficient steps of a man who had practiced moving unseen. He carried a pot of coffee that steamed in the air like a dark omen. The plan, if it could be called that, was ugly and immediate. Make it look like a mistake. Create chaos where a single round would be clear. Break the line of sight. Break the moment. He approached Evelyn from the side. Up close, she smelled of powder and citrus. She turned toward him as if she expected a polite bow, a compliment, a business card. She did not expect him to stumble. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, voice low, professional. His foot caught on the hem of a rug that hadn't been there moments before. The tray tilted. Coffee leapt. It struck her first on the shoulder, then raced down the front of her dress in a black, scalding sheet. The sound of the spill came as a small, mundane noise. A second later, glass thundered behind her, thin, clean glass imploding where it had taken a bullet that missed. The ballroom inhaled. The orchestra stopped like a snapped string. People screamed. Flashbulbs flickered faster. For the cameras, it was perfect. A powerful woman, bedraggled and ruined mid-gala. For everyone else, it was chaos. "Jesus," someone called. "Somebody, call security." Evelyn Hart's eyes flashed from pain to fury. She set a hand against her chest, feeling the sting of hot liquid on skin that had been taught to be unfeeling. Her lips curled. Her voice came out sharp, a razor under velvet. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Gloves closed on Julian's arms. 2 guards had him in a motion that read like choreography. Hands behind his back, a cuff clicking. He didn't resist. He did the thing soldiers do when the job is done. He let himself be contained so someone else could do the next necessary thing. He had seen the shooter step, had seen the camera lens flare for the wrong reason. He had felt the smallest, most human relief when the bullet missed. He felt it now, small and sharp, relief that she was alive. Her eyes met his then, in a slice of light thick enough to cut. In them she read arrogance. He read something else entirely. An exhausted, wired certainty that the world had tilted enough times to know the little ways it fell. "Don't touch him," Evelyn said, suddenly authoritative. The guards paused, uncertain. She was still on her feet, trembling but imperious. "I said don't touch him." A security man frowned and relayed the order with an edge of disbelief. "Ma'am, leave him," she repeated, because people obeyed a voice with a reputation. The guards hesitated, then backed off. Julian remained where they had left him, wrists red where the cuffs bit. It took a minute for the initial panic to decompress into practical motion. Emily's assistant, pale and furious, fussed over the dress and offered towels. Her PR man started assessing the optics aloud. Marcus Hale, her COO, arrived with the calm of a man who had hoped this night would be about numbers, not drama. His smile was quick and too bright. "Are you all right? This is manageable." Evelyn pulled a towel from a plate and dabbed her arm, eyes still fixed on Julian. "Manageable? He just tried to publicly ruin me." "You can press charges," Marcus said. "We will press charges. He'll be out of the industry within a day." She didn't answer. Instead, she made a decision that surprised everyone, starting with Marcus. "I want him down in security, now." Her voice had a flat quality, like someone who measured risk and decided to meet it on their own terms. They escorted Julian out through a side door, into a room that smelled of static and old coffee, an improvised security office, where the fluorescent lights made people look more honest than they felt. He sat on a metal chair, shirt cockled from the spill, hair damp along his temples. A policeman checked him for weapons and found only restraint. He had no knife, no gun, no explanation beyond a steady gaze. Evelyn entered 10 minutes later, wrapped in a dry blazer, bruised pride tucked under her composed face. The room narrowed around them. No extraneous noise, no audience, no applause. Just surveillance monitors, blinking static, and 2 cynical chairs. She stood with her hands on her hips. The gap between public and private was a physical thing now. Security lights turned on the edges of her face, made her look like she belonged to both worlds equally. "You know," she said, "this is a spectacular way to ruin my reputation." Julian cocked his head as if he heard something amusing. "Better that than no reputation at all," he said. Her laugh was a single, brittle sound. "You're not funny." "No," he admitted. "I'm not trying to be. I'm trying to be understood." Understood. Her incredulity was a blade. "You drench me in coffee in front of hundreds of investors, photographers, board members. You think I'm going to understand?" Her voice rose. "Do you know what this does to my company's image? Do you know what this does to me?" "I know what it does to you, ma'am," Julian said. "I know what it does to the people who care about you, and the people who want you dead. You say that like it's a fact." She leaned in, eyes hard. "You say it like you've been watching me for weeks. Like this was a plan." "You don't have to believe the plan," he replied. "You can check the glass behind you. You can ask the press pit who left. But here's what I did. I took a gamble to make it look like an accident." "If I'd done nothing, you would have been—" He stopped. The unsaid hung between them like smoke. She swallowed. The camera's images were already splashed over 100 live feeds. She could feel the heat of 1,000 private messages forming judgments. Reputation was a thing you could rebuild, over time, with apologies, with staged interviews. Life's, on the other hand, didn't offer that luxury. She knew that rationally. The question was whether she could allow someone else to decide for her what came first, public image or private survival. "You think I'm gullible," she said finally. "I don't think anything," Julian said. "I know." He had the kind of certainty that made her glance away. Marcus cleared his throat in the doorway. "Ma'am, we should call the police. We should press this—" Evelyn cut him off. "I want the footage from the ballroom. I want the camera closest to the stage. I want the consumer hotlines and the event coordinator's roster for the last week. And get me a medical report for the burn. I will decide what to do." Her tone was executive, but the tremor at the edge of it gave the order the shape of something human. Marcus nodded, already dialing. She let him go. Then she faced Julian again. "Why did you spill the coffee?" she demanded. Her voice was small in that room, which was why he could hear it like a rifle. Julian's shoulders eased the barest fraction. For a blink he looked very tired. "Exhaustion more than fear. Because I saw a man with a gun pretending to be a photographer," he said. "Because the shooter had a clear line to the stage. Because someone I used to know was aiming at you." She stared. "You're saying this was an assassination?" "Call it what you want." His voice was flat. He had a camera. "It wasn't a camera." Evelyn let out a breath that started like a laugh and turned into a sob she didn't mean to make. "You expect me to take the word of whoever ruins my dress?" "I don't expect anything," Julian said. "I did what I had to do. If I were wrong, then sue me. If I were right, then be furious at the man who tried to kill you, not at the person who tried to stop him." "You could have run," she snapped. "You could have called for help, made a scene. You tell me how you call for help when no one can tell the difference between a flash and a muzzle," Julian said. "You tell me how an audience of 500 doesn't turn into a stampede in 3 seconds. You could have... I could have let you die," he finished for her. His eyes burned now with something like a tired accusation. "Or I could have done something ugly and embarrassing and kept you breathing for the legal fallout." "I chose ugly." Evelyn's hands tightened on the edge of the table beside her. For a moment she pictured exactly what he'd described. A field of faces frozen. A photograph of her falling viral. Funeral tributes and analysts and vicious commentators. She had rehearsed for image crises. She had not rehearsed for this particular import of truth. "Why?" she asked softer, Julian's jaw set. "Because someone didn't save me once," he said. "Because I remembered what it felt like to have a life taken and not be able to do anything about it. And because my kid needs me to come home." "You said there was a man. You said his name was—" "I don't know his name," Julian snapped. "I only know his face. Lars Kincaid." The name landed like a stone. He had expected panic, disbelief, even denial. Instead, he watched Evelyn's color change as she repeated the syllables. Lars Kincaid. Her face didn't show recognition at first, but then something cool and clinical tightened about her mouth. "How do you know that name?" she asked. "I remember a mission," he said. "We were both in a place that smelled like blood and diesel. He left with a smile and a scar, and everybody else left in pieces. He's the kind of man who doesn't show up at charity galas unless he's been hired to do something." Evelyn thought of meetings, of mergers, of enemies with suits and white collars. She thought of the men who had wanted her empire. She thought of people who made mistakes and people who made plans. The thought of someone trying to take her life in a ballroom, audible and obvious, came like a cold draft. She had to make a choice that night the way she always did. Fast, clean, strategic. She could hand Julian over, make an example, find comfort in a tidy narrative. Or she could follow the messy trail his presence implied. She straightened. There was a new angle to the fury in her eyes now, not merely the flash of wounded pride, but a sharpened purpose. "If you're lying," she said, voice low and dangerous, "I will make sure you regret it." Julian's reply was a small, dry sound like someone tucking a memory away. He looked at her full on, steadier than she'd expected. "If I were lying," he said, "you'd already be dead." The words hung and then landed. Evelyn felt the room tilt a fraction. She had a file of enemies and a calendar of threats. She'd never ranked such a man among them. She left the security room then, with Marcus at her elbow and a towel pressed to her arm, her mind already moving through contingency, counsel, and countermeasures. She would decide what to do. Outside, the gala continued as if it had not been pierced by a narrow, homicidal intention. Inside her, a new disturbance spread, a particular acute unease that had nothing to do with reputation and everything to do with a strange man sitting cuffed and smelling faintly of coffee and smoke. She had not yet named what she felt. She did not know if it was fear, gratitude, or something closer to respect. She only knew one fact. Something in her world had changed, and it began with the scorch on her skin and the certainty in his voice. "If I were lying, you'd already be dead." The words kept looping in Evelyn's head long after she left the room. "If I were lying, you'd already be dead. They echoed against the marble corridors of the Grand Aurora, following her through the aftermath. The noise, the murmurs, the pitying looks. Cameras had stopped flashing, but their ghosts still followed her every step. Somewhere in the chaos, she could almost hear Julian Ward's calm, unshakable voice threading through the din like a warning she couldn't unhear. By midnight, the gala was over, the story already online, CEO humiliated in gala scandal. Her PR team was scrambling, the legal team drafting statements, and the hospital report called it a minor burn. Nothing about bullets. Nothing about assassins. Nothing about truth. But Evelyn couldn't let it go. Back at her penthouse overlooking the East River, the city lights flickered across glass walls like restless ghosts. She stood barefoot in her office, still in the ruined white gown, a patch of red skin visible above her collarbone. The dress was destroyed, but her mind wasn't done replaying the scene. The sound of shattering glass, the way Julian didn't flinch, the certainty in his tone. Her assistant, Clara, hovered at the doorway. "Should I have the dress sent to the cleaners?" Evelyn didn't look up. "No, send it to the lab," Clara blinked. "The lab? I want the residue analyzed. Coffee, glass, anything." She turned, eyes sharp. "And get me every second of ballroom footage. Every camera. Every angle. Especially the press pit." Clara hesitated. She'd never seen Evelyn this still and this dangerous at the same time. "Yes, ma'am." When the door shut, Evelyn sat down, fingers brushing her collarbone where the burn still ached. For a long time, she stared at her reflection in the dark window. She looked fine, composed. But inside, something small had cracked open, a thin line between control and curiosity. The footage arrived before dawn. Evelyn sat alone in her home office, a tumbler of whiskey untouched beside her keyboard. On screen, the gala replayed. The laughter, the speeches, the crowd. Then the moment. There. Julian walking forward. Lars. She didn't know his name yet. Only the man in the gray suit, lifting the camera. The frame stuttered, then the spill, the chaos. Evelyn froze the image, rewound, zoomed in. The man's hands, the way he gripped the camera. Her stomach twisted. It wasn't how photographers held their tools. It was how someone steadied a barrel. Seconds later, the man turned and disappeared, slipping through the crowd like smoke. Gone before security even reacted. Evelyn sat back in her chair, her breath shallow. She hated that she felt something like guilt, the kind of guilt that tasted like uncertainty. Julian Ward's words, "better a burn than a bullet," now sounded less like arrogance and more like fact. Her fingers tightened around the mouse. "Who are you, Julian Ward?" By noon, she had the answer. Marcus Hale entered her office carrying a thin manila folder. "You asked for everything on the waiter," he said carefully, placing it on her desk. Evelyn didn't thank him. She waited until the door closed before opening it. Inside were photocopied files, fragments from government databases half redacted with black ink. Julian Ward, age 35, former field agent, Department of Strategic Security, honorably discharged 8 years ago, no criminal record. Then, an old memo, half-torn. Subject involved in Project Helios, classified. Her pulse slowed. That name, Helios, belonged to her father's company, a project he'd buried before his death. She flipped the page, and the next, a surveillance photo from 2016. Julian, younger, standing behind a man in a hospital bed. The patient's face was turned away, but the caption under the photo read, "Dr. Leonard Hart, her father." Evelyn's chest tightened. The glass of whiskey she hadn't touched all morning trembled in her hand. For a moment, the office blurred around her, replaced by the sterile smell of antiseptic and the quiet beeping of a heart monitor from 7 years ago. Her father dying, her young self standing frozen, watching men in suits whisper outside the door. And now, Julian Ward's face appearing in that memory she couldn't quite trust. "What the hell were you doing there?" she whispered to the file. That night, she didn't sleep. The city beyond her window pulsed with light, but her penthouse felt silent, airless. She read through Julian's file again and again, each time feeling her anger grow sharper. because anger was easier than fear. He was part of her father's world. That much was clear. But why hide it? Why show up as a waiter in her gala? Why save her? Unless he needed her alive for something worse. When the clock hit 2 a.m., she poured herself another drink and tried to convince herself she didn't care. But the thought of Julian's eyes, steady, unreadable, kept intruding. She hated the way that calmness had shaken her. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under. And then the dream came. Her father's hospital room. Dim light, machines whispering. She could smell the disinfectant, the faint scent of burning metal. Her father, pale and small against the white sheets, looked at her with those fading eyes, the same blue she saw in her own reflection every morning. "Evelyn," he whispered. "Don't let them finish it. Don't trust," the words broke off, replaced by the sound of a flatline. She turned, desperate, calling for a doctor, and saw him standing in the doorway. Julian older, in the same black shirt, watching her with a calm she couldn't bear. His eyes held something like pity. Or guilt. She tried to move, but her legs wouldn't work. "What are you doing here?" He didn't answer. He stepped closer, his voice low. "You were never supposed to find out." Then his hand reached for her, and everything went white. Evelyn woke with a start, breath ragged, sheets tangled. Sweat clung to her neck, her pulse racing like she'd been running for miles. For a second, she didn't know where she was. Then the skyline came into focus. Her office, her glass walls, her empty bed. She pressed a hand to her chest and whispered, it was just a dream. But she didn't believe it, because somewhere deep down, in that strange half-awake clarity that only nightmares bring, she knew. The dream wasn't random. It was a memory resurfacing, one her mind had buried too long, and Julian Ward was in it. By morning, she was done doubting. Evelyn strode into her company headquarters, heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. Her employees moved aside instinctively. She didn't speak until she reached Marcus's office. "Get me Ward," she said. Marcus blinked. "The waiter?" "Former agent," she corrected. "He's being held, isn't he?" "Yes, ma'am, but the police—" "Release him quietly," Marcus frowned. "You're sure that's—" "I'm not sure of anything," she cut in. "That's why I need him to talk." 2 hours later, Julian sat in a private conference room, wrists uncuffed, posture relaxed as if none of this concerned him. Evelyn entered without a word, closing the door behind her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she said evenly, "You knew my father." Julian didn't look surprised. "You found the file." "I found enough." He nodded slowly. "Then you know why I was there that night." "I don't," she snapped. "All I know is you worked for the same program that destroyed him. And now you're back, as a waiter at my event, claiming to save me. You can see why that sounds insane." Julian's gaze stayed steady. "Helios wasn't destroyed. It was buried. And your father didn't die from illness, Evelyn. He was silenced." She felt the blood drain from her face. "You're lying." His expression didn't change. "Am I?" Her throat went dry. She wanted to argue, to call security, to walk out. But something in his voice, the calm conviction of someone who had nothing left to prove, froze her. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. "You can hate me if you want. I don't blame you, but if you really want answers about your father, you're going to have to let me help you." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "And why the hell would I trust you?" Julian held her gaze. "Because whether you like it or not, someone still wants you dead. And I'm the only one who knows why." Her fingers clenched at her side. She hated him, his tone, his composure, his quiet control. But more than anything, she hated that a small, traitorous part of her believed every word. Outside, the wind howled against the glass windows of the building. Inside, the two of them stood locked in a silence that felt like the start of something dangerous. Not trust. Not yet, but an uneasy alliance built on truth neither of them fully understood. And for the first time, Evelyn Hart realized the burn on her shoulder was nothing compared to the fire she'd just stepped into. The silence between them stretched like glass, transparent but ready to shatter. Evelyn stood by the window, her reflection fractured by the skyline. Julian sat opposite her, the shadows of early evening crawling up his face. They were both exhausted in different ways, she from questions, he from years of carrying answers no one wanted. Finally, Evelyn spoke, her tone clipped. "You're out. I've signed your release." Julian's eyes flicked up. "That was fast. I don't like loose ends," she replied. "You'll stay in New York. My people will monitor you until I decide what to do next." He almost smiled. "I expected worse." She ignored the remark, sliding a folder across the table. "That's your temporary clearance. You'll report directly to me, and only me. You said you wanted to help. Now's your chance." Julian took the folder but didn't open it. "Then I'll ask one favor." Evelyn didn't look at him. "You're not in a position to ask for anything." "I'm not asking for myself." He leaned forward, tone lower now, stripped of sarcasm. "Don't let my daughter get dragged into this." That made her pause. "You have a daughter?" "Yes." His voice softened slightly. "She's 8. Her name's Lila." Evelyn blinked, caught off guard by the quiet gravity in his tone. "And where is she?" "With a neighbor. Safe, for now." He hesitated before adding, "She's sick. Needs constant care." Something flickered behind Evelyn's expression. Not pity exactly, but discomfort. The word daughter had always been complicated for her. She had never been one in the way her father's world wanted. "You think someone will target her?" she asked. "I know they will," Julian said flatly. "They don't fail twice." Evelyn exhaled, walking to the window again. "Fine, she won't be touched. But you follow my rules, Ward. One lie, one secret, and I'll end this arrangement before you blink." Julian's reply came quietly, but with an edge. "You already don't trust me." "No," she said, turning toward him, "but I trust patterns. And men who carry ghosts don't always know where they're leading them." For a moment their eyes locked, her suspicion meeting his exhaustion. Then she turned away, cutting the connection before it became something else. 2 days later, Evelyn arrived at a nondescript apartment complex on the east side, her security detail waiting discreetly in the car. She told them she didn't need company. She wanted to see the child herself. Julian opened the door before she could knock twice. He looked different in daylight, less like a threat, more like a man trying to blend into an ordinary life. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, a faint scar visible along his forearm. "Didn't think you'd actually come," he said. "I needed to verify your story." He stepped aside. "Then verify." Inside the apartment was small but clean. The hum of a medical monitor filled the living room. On the couch under a pale blanket was a little girl. Thin, fragile, eyes closed. Tubes trailed from beneath the fabric, leading to a portable oxygen machine. Evelyn's breath caught for reasons she didn't understand. "This is Lila?" she asked quietly. Julian nodded. "She had surgery last year. Heart condition." The girl stirred slightly, opening her eyes. They were large, clear gray, the same gray as Evelyn's. She smiled faintly when she saw him. Then her gaze drifted to the stranger in the doorway. "Daddy." "Who's that?" Julian's voice softened in a way Evelyn had never heard. "Just a friend from work, sweetheart." Evelyn crouched slightly, forcing a polite smile. "Hi, Lila." The girl's voice was weak but curious. "You look like the lady on TV." Evelyn froze. Julian smiled faintly. "She gets that a lot." Lila giggled, then coughed lightly. Evelyn's instinct, sharp, corporate, mechanical, wanted to recoil, to retreat from emotion. But something else made her move closer, adjusting the girl's blanket. "You should rest," she murmured. Lila nodded, eyes fluttering shut again. Evelyn looked at her face, the delicate line of her nose, the faint dimple at the corner of her mouth. There was something achingly familiar. Too familiar. When they stepped out onto the balcony later, Julian leaned against the railing, watching the street below. "She looks like someone," Evelyn said quietly. He didn't respond. "I've seen those eyes before," she continued, her voice tightening. "In my father's photographs." Julian finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You're reaching, Hart, am I?" She shot back. "Because my father once had an assistant named Amelia Ward. Biochemist. Brilliant. Disappeared just before the Helios project shut down. Julian's jaw flexed. Leave her out of this. She's your wife, isn't she? He didn't answer. Evelyn took a step closer. You said your daughter's name is Lila. Amelia's middle name was Lillian. That's not a coincidence. Julian turned away, knuckles white against the railing. This isn't your business. It became my business the second you showed up in my life, she snapped. My father ruined lives, Mr. Ward. I deserve to know if yours was one of them. He faced her then, anger flickering in his usually calm eyes. You think this is about revenge? About money? I didn't come to your gala for you. I came because someone resurrected Helios, and if they're willing to kill you for it, it means the same people who destroyed Amelia are back. Evelyn's breath hitched. Destroyed? Julian's voice broke a little. She died because of your father's work, because she found out what Helios really was. Silence fell like ash. Evelyn's heart pounded in her ears. The wind carried the faint hum of the oxygen machine inside. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. What was it? Julian's eyes softened. Something that could rewrite DNA, heal diseases, or weaponize them. Amelia tried to stop it. Your father called it progress. Her chest tightened. So Lila, she's sick because of it, he said. Helios was supposed to cure congenital defects. Instead, it created them. Amelia was pregnant when the tests went wrong. Evelyn felt like the ground had shifted under her. She turned away, gripping the cold railing. Her father's legacy, the one she'd built her empire on, was suddenly soaked in guilt she didn't want to carry. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Julian said quietly, Now you understand why I don't want her anywhere near this. Evelyn nodded slowly, still facing the skyline. I won't let her be. Later that night, Evelyn returned to her penthouse, but her thoughts stayed in that small apartment, with the little girl's quiet breathing, her gray eyes, the way Julian's voice softened when he said her name. She poured herself a drink, but it didn't help. The whiskey burned down her throat, but not as much as the thought that kept repeating in her head. Lila has my father's eyes. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out an old photo. Her father, years younger, standing beside a woman she'd never noticed before. The woman had dark hair, gentle features, and the faintest smile. Amelia Ward. The name burned now. She traced the woman's face with her thumb. The same line of the jaw, the same gray eyes, and suddenly, the impossible thought she'd been resisting all day took root. Lila might be my sister. Evelyn sank into her chair, pressing the photo to her forehead. She wanted to hate Julian for what he represented, her father's betrayal, the collapse of everything she'd built on a lie. But she couldn't, because somewhere between fury and pity, a strange ache had started to grow. The next morning, Julian showed up at her office unannounced. He looked tired, unshaven, but his presence drew every gaze in the building. Evelyn dismissed her staff and closed the blinds. You shouldn't be here, she said. He gave a faint smirk. You said we were working together. I said I'd decide what to do with you, she countered. I didn't say I'd let you walk into my building like you own it. Relax, he said. I just came to tell you I found something. That got her attention. What? He dropped a small flash drive on her desk. Records from the Department of Strategic Security. Someone's been pulling Helios files out of storage under your company's name. Either you have a traitor inside, or you've got an enemy who knows how to look like one. Evelyn stared at the drive. How did you get this? Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. For a moment, their eyes met again, hers sharp with suspicion, his calm but wounded. And in that look, beneath all the anger and mistrust, something fragile sparked. Recognition. Of loss, of shared ghosts. She looked away first. You should go. Julian hesitated, then nodded. Keep the drive safe. And Evelyn, she looked up. Whatever you think about me, don't take it out on Lila. She didn't choose any of this. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving her alone with the faint smell of coffee and smoke, the scent that always seemed to follow him. Evelyn stared at the flash drive, heart pounding, knowing that whatever truth lay inside it would change everything. Her company, her family, and the fragile line between hatred and something dangerously close to desire. That night, standing by her window, she whispered to the city below, "Who the hell are you, Julian Ward?" But deep down, she already knew the answer she feared most. He wasn't just her savior. He was the living reminder of every scar her father left behind, and despite herself, she wasn't sure if she wanted him gone. Or closer. It started with a contract. Clean, professional, emotionless. Just a page of terms binding two people who didn't trust each other. Julian Ward, security consultant. Evelyn Hart, client. The ink wasn't even dry when both realized the boundaries it tried to set would never hold. 3 days after their tense encounter, Evelyn officially hired him. On paper, he was her private security advisor, tasked with investigating the failed assassination and identifying whoever was reviving Project Helios. In reality, he was the one man she couldn't fully control, and the one she couldn't fully ignore. Their work began at night. By day, Evelyn's company buzzed with controlled chaos. Lawyers smoothing scandals, PR teams burying headlines, investors calling for reassurance. But at night, the building emptied, and it was just them, the CEO and the ex-agent, combing through encrypted files in the glass-walled office that overlooked a city too loud to sleep. Julian preferred silence. Evelyn filled it with questions. How did you find this breach? Who else knew about Helios? What are you not telling me? He answered only what mattered. His voice was calm, steady, maddeningly so. Sometimes, when the hum of the computer was the only sound left, she'd glance up from her screen and find him watching her reflection in the glass. Not directly, never directly, but enough to make her heartbeat skip, like her body knew something her mind refused to name. The distance between them became a silent battlefield, all glances and restrained words, both too guarded to step forward and too curious to step back. It was during one of those late nights that Clara noticed the change. Clara Nguyen, Evelyn's oldest friend, head of communications, the woman who had been with her since college. Sharp, loyal, and dangerous when crossed, she had seen Evelyn survive scandal, heartbreak, and empire building, but she had never seen her hesitate. That night, as Clara entered the office, she found Evelyn leaning over Julian's shoulder, both staring at a data map glowing across the screen. Their proximity was professional almost. Almost. Long night? Clara said, breaking the quiet. Evelyn straightened. We're following a lead. Julian didn't look up. Found a few digital trails. Someone's rerouting data through offshore accounts under your company's name. Clara's eyes flicked toward him, and for the first time, the mask of practiced composure cracked. Her pulse stumbled. She knew that voice, that posture, that scar running along his jaw. It couldn't be. When Julian finally turned, their gazes collided, and the air thickened. "Clara?" he said, his tone unreadable. Her face went pale. "You..." Evelyn looked between them. "You two know each other?" Neither answered. Clara's nails dug into her palm. The years collapsed inward. The rain-soaked night he vanished, the unanswered calls, the way she'd searched for him for months before realizing he was never coming back. "I should check the press updates," Clara said tightly, before walking out, her heels clicking too sharply against the marble floor. Julian exhaled slowly. Evelyn watched him, suspicion flickering in her eyes. "Old acquaintance?" she asked. His voice was low. Something like that. But the look on his face told her it was more. Much more. Clara didn't sleep that night. She poured herself a glass of wine, sat in her apartment, and stared at the city lights. Julian Ward, the man who had broken her, the man who had vanished without explanation, the man who was now working beside her best friend. She laughed bitterly to herself. Of course, Evelyn always gets what's mine. But bitterness alone wasn't enough. Clara had power, access to media, to investors, to Marcus Hale. Marcus, the ambitious COO who had been waiting for Evelyn to fall. By dawn, she had a plan. Days blurred together. Julian and Evelyn's investigation unearthed more than they expected: hidden accounts, encrypted memos, names of board members who shouldn't exist. Every discovery drew them closer, not in trust, but in necessity. One night, they worked side by side in her penthouse office. Rain lashed the windows, city lights flickering against the storm. Evelyn leaned over the desk, reviewing the new data Julian had decrypted. "This file was accessed from inside our system," he said. "Only 3 people had clearance: you, Hale, and your communications director. Clara?" Evelyn frowned. "She's been with me for 15 years. She's loyal." Julian's eyes flicked toward her. "Loyalty changes when people bleed," she glared. "You don't know her." He leaned back in his chair, voice steady. "I didn't say I didn't." Their eyes met, hers sharp, his unreadable. The silence stretched until it felt electric. Somewhere in that silence, the distance between them thinned to something almost dangerous. Evelyn looked away first. "You're impossible," Julian smiled faintly. "That's mutual. It should have ended there." But it didn't. Hours later, she found herself standing by the window again, watching his reflection in the glass as he packed up his laptop. "Why did you come back, Julian?" she asked suddenly. He hesitated. "You mean to New York?" "I mean here, with me." He turned, meeting her gaze. "Because if I didn't, you'd be dead." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you'll get tonight." Their eyes held for a heartbeat too long, cold and burning all at once, until the sound of her phone broke it. Evelyn turned away, composing herself, but her pulse betrayed her calm. Meanwhile, Clara was moving her pieces. Marcus Hale had always wanted control of the company, of the board, of Evelyn. But he lacked access. Clara gave him that, wrapped in a whisper. "She's losing focus," Clara told him, her tone deceptively gentle. "She's distracted. He's distracting her." Marcus leaned back, intrigued. "The ex-agent? She trusts him too much. Let the press find out what kind of man he used to be." Within hours, Clara had leaked fragments, photos of Julian's military record, his classified ties, even a rumor of his involvement in Amelia Ward's death. The headlines were quiet but sharp. CEO Evelyn Hart hires ex-agent linked to scandal. Evelyn saw it the next morning. The color drained from her face as she scrolled. God. Julian stood beside her, reading over her shoulder. "They're not wrong," he said quietly. "That's not helping." He turned away, jaw tight. "I told you this would happen." She slammed the tablet down. "You didn't tell me she would do it." "She?" Evelyn met his eyes. "Clara. She's the only one who could leak this with internal phrasing." "I know her writing." Julian's expression darkened. "She's your friend." "Was," Evelyn said coldly. "Now she's a liability." He hesitated. "Then let me handle it." Evelyn looked at him, a trace of something conflicted in her eyes. "You mean talk to her or eliminate her?" His silence was its own answer. That evening, Clara waited for him. The rooftop bar was almost empty, the city below glowing like molten steel. She wore black, sharp, deliberate. When Julian arrived, she smiled the kind of smile that hurt to look at. "Still alive," she said. "Guess some things don't change." Julian sat opposite her. "You shouldn't have leaked that. Oh, please. You left me, Julian. No calls, no note. Just gone. And now you're here, saving another woman, working for her like nothing happened." He sighed. "It wasn't what you think." "Then tell me what it was." "I was trying to keep you safe." "By disappearing?" Her voice trembled. "You broke me. And now, you think you can protect her? The woman who's had everything her whole life?" He leaned forward, eyes calm but pained. "You don't understand," she smiled bitterly. "No, Julian. I understand perfectly. You always protect the ones you think need saving, even if you destroy the ones who already love you." He didn't answer. She leaned closer, whispering, "You took something from me." "I'm just taking it back." When he left, her expression hardened. The next phase of her plan was already in motion. At Hart Biogen, Evelyn was preparing for war, corporate and personal. The board was fracturing, the media feeding frenzy rising, and Julian's presence now a liability she couldn't afford yet couldn't let go of. That night, as she stood alone in her office, he walked in quietly. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you." He took a step closer. "You're shaking." "I'm fine." "You're lying." She turned toward him, and for the first time in weeks, something raw surfaced. Not anger, not defiance, just exhaustion. "You think saving me gives you the right to read me?" "No," he said softly. "But it gives me the right to worry." Their eyes locked again, closer this time. The storm that had been circling them since the first night finally narrowed to a single point. Evelyn's breath hitched. "You should go." Julian didn't move. "You don't want me to." Her voice was a whisper. "Maybe not, but that doesn't mean I should want you here." For a heartbeat, they stood frozen, silence crackling between them like static. Then she stepped back, breaking it. "Good night, Mr. Ward." He hesitated, then nodded once and left. The moment the door closed, Evelyn exhaled, her hands trembling. She hated that he made her feel alive. She hated even more that she needed him to survive. Across the city, Clara watched the news feeds update, Evelyn's empire cracking, headlines multiplying. She smiled faintly, a queen satisfied with her first move. But beneath the satisfaction was something darker, hungrier, not just revenge. She wanted to see Julian fall, to see Evelyn burn, to destroy the one thing she'd never had, the man who could love her enough to stay. And the fire she had lit was only just beginning to spread. Rain hammered the windows of Hart Biogen like a warning. Evelyn stood at the top floor, staring down at the city below. Her city, her empire, unaware that everything beneath her feet was already cracking. Julian had been gone for hours. He'd left before dawn, chasing a lead he hadn't shared. She told herself she didn't care. But every time the elevator chimed and it wasn't him, something in her chest twisted tighter. At exactly 7:42 p.m., he came back. His coat was drenched, his jaw clenched, and his eyes carried a look that she'd learned to recognize. Danger, barely contained. "Where were you?" Evelyn asked, the words sharper than she intended. "Finding answers," he said, "and I found one." He placed a folder on her desk, soaked through but intact. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside were photos, grainy surveillance stills, timestamps, names, and one name she didn't expect to see. Marcus Hale. Julian's voice was quiet, deadly calm. "He paid Lars Kincaid. He's the one who ordered the hit." Evelyn's heart skipped. "Marcus, that's impossible. He's been with me for a decade." "Which makes him perfect," Julian said. "He knows your routines, your blind spots, your enemies. And now that the board's under pressure, he has motive." Evelyn shook her head, refusing to let the thought take shape. "He wouldn't—" "He already did," Julian interrupted. "I have the transfer records. Offshore accounts. Coded messages between him and a handler." Silence filled the room. Thick, electric, suffocating. Evelyn's mind raced, but her body felt frozen. Then her phone buzzed. A message from Clara. "You need to see this, before you trust the wrong man." Attached was a single video file. Evelyn frowned, then hit play. The screen flickered. A lab, sterile, white, filled with the low hum of machines. Her father sat in a wheelchair, frail, his oxygen mask fogging with each breath. Behind him stood Julian Ward, younger, in a black uniform. His face was cold, unreadable. "Dr. Hart?" someone off-screen said. "It's time." Her father's voice was faint. "Julian, please!" And then the feed cut. Static, then black. Evelyn froze. The tablet slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. Julian turned. "What was that?" Her eyes were glassy, trembling between disbelief and horror. "Tell me it's fake," he frowned. "What are you talking about?" She grabbed the tablet and shoved it toward him. "Tell me this isn't real." Julian stared at the video, the color draining from his face. "Where did you get this?" "Answer me!" Her voice broke through the silence like glass shattering. "Were you there? With my father? Right before he died?" Julian didn't move. For the first time, he looked unsure, like a man realizing a past mistake was finally catching him. "Yes," he said quietly. "But it wasn't— Don't." Evelyn stepped back. Her breath came shallow. "You lied to me. You worked for him. You knew him. You used me." "No," he said, firm now, desperate. "I was protecting him. He was dying, Evelyn. He wanted Helios shut down. He asked me to— Don't you dare say his name," she snapped. "You killed him." Julian's voice cracked. "That's not true." "Then why were you there when he died?" "Because I tried to save him." But the look in her eyes said she'd already stopped listening. The elevator doors opened. 2 of her private security agents stepped in, waiting. "Take him," she said, voice trembling but cold. Julian stared at her, disbelief bleeding into pain. "You're making a mistake. I made it the day I let you in." The guards grabbed him by the arms. He didn't resist, just kept his gaze on her, unreadable, wounded. "Evelyn," he said softly, "whoever sent you that video, they're not saving you. They're destroying you. Get him out," she said. The door shut, and just like that, the one man who had saved her life disappeared from it again. This time, by her own order. Marcus Hale watched the live feed from his office with a satisfied smirk. He poured himself a glass of scotch, the amber liquid catching the city light. "Perfect timing," he murmured. Clara stood by the window, her arms crossed. "She saw it?" Marcus nodded. "She did exactly what we needed her to. He's out, isolated, angry. And when the lab goes up in flames tonight, guess who she'll blame?" Clara's lips curved, but her eyes were dark. "You think she'll survive it?" "She won't," Marcus said simply. "But that's the beauty of it. The evidence points to him. The motive points to him. And the world will mourn their tragic little affair." Clara flinched at the word affair. "They weren't lovers," Marcus smirked. "Give them time, and they would have been." Her eyes flicked to him. "You're sure about this?" "Absolutely. The explosion wipes the data. The board votes me interim CEO, and Ward becomes the monster of her story." He turned to face her. "You wanted revenge on him, Clara? I'm giving you something better. Erasure." Clara looked away, the weight of it pressing against her chest. She'd wanted him to hurt, yes, but now the plan felt like something darker. Still, she didn't stop it. She'd already gone too far. Across the city, Julian sat alone in his apartment, wrists bruised from the guard's grip. Lila was asleep in the next room, her oxygen monitor blinking softly in the dark. He stared at the photo he kept hidden in his wallet. Amelia, smiling, the edges faded with time. He could still hear Evelyn's voice. "You killed him." He closed his eyes. Not him, but someone did. Then his phone buzzed. An encrypted message appeared on the screen. No name, just coordinates. Hart Biogen, sublevel 3, midnight. He's finishing what your father started. Julian's stomach dropped. Evelyn tried to work, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The image of her father's pleading face haunted her like an echo. The man she'd trusted, the man she'd almost let in, was the same one standing beside her father's deathbed. She poured another drink, but the burn did nothing. Guilt, anger, heartbreak. They blurred into one jagged edge. Then Clara entered quietly. "You should rest," Clara said gently. Evelyn didn't look at her. "Did you know?" Clara hesitated. "About what, Julian?" "About him and my father." "I knew he had a past," Clara said softly. "I tried to warn you, Evelyn. Men like him don't change." Evelyn's shoulders shook once, almost imperceptibly. "I trusted him." Clara moved closer, resting a hand on her shoulder. "We all make mistakes, but the touch felt wrong, rehearsed, too comforting." Evelyn didn't notice the way Clara's gaze flicked toward the clock. 11:56 p.m. At that moment, Julian was already inside the building. He moved through the security corridors like a ghost, every step measured, every sound memorized. He'd spent years in buildings like this, clean, silent, ready to kill the uninvited. Sublevel 3, the Helios lab. When he reached the control room, the lights were already on. A faint hum filled the air, machines active when they shouldn't be. Then he saw it. The charge device, hidden beneath the main console, small but military grade, Marcus Hale's signature. Efficient, ruthless. Julian's breath quickened. He reached for his phone, calling the only number that mattered. Evelyn answered on the third ring. Her voice was cold. "What do you want? You have to leave the building. Now. I'm not playing this game with you. Evelyn, listen to me. Marcus planted explosives in the Helios lab. He's going to blow it up and frame me. You're lying." "Think about it," Julian said sharply. He had access. He knew the project. He knew how to turn you against me. There was a pause, a flicker of hesitation. "Why should I believe you? Because if you don't, you'll be dead in 5 minutes." And then the line cut. Upstairs, Clara watched Evelyn pale as the call ended. "What's wrong?" she asked. Evelyn stood abruptly. "Something's happening in the lab." Clara blinked. "Evelyn!" But Evelyn was already running. Julian ripped open the console panel, wires sparking in his hands. The timer read 0243. He'd disarmed bombs before, but never one tied to someone else's ego. He worked fast, sweat dripping into his eyes, cutting through the circuits. Red, green, white. The sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. He looked up. "Evelyn, what the hell are you doing?" she shouted. "Saving your life again," he snapped. "Now get out." Her voice trembled. "You're the one who brought this here." "Not this time." Marcus did. He grabbed her wrist, dragging her toward the door. "Move." The timer hit 039. They sprinted down the hall, the alarms beginning to wail. Behind them, glass shattered and the floor trembled. The explosion ripped through the sublevel, flames swallowing everything they left behind. Julian threw her to the ground as debris crashed overhead. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. He covered her with his body, shielding her from the firestorm that roared past. When the noise finally died, the world was dust and heat and ringing silence. Evelyn opened her eyes. He was still there, bruised, bleeding, but alive. Their faces were inches apart. "You still think I killed your father?" he whispered, voice raw. Evelyn's answer came in a breath. "I don't know what to think anymore." He gave a faint, broken smile. "Good. That's a start." And as the sirens wailed in the distance, Evelyn Hart realized the truth she'd spent her life running from. Every lie she'd believed, every truth she'd buried, was about to burn. And the only man who could save her was the one she'd already destroyed. The fire began like a whisper, a low, rising hum from deep inside the ruins of Hart Biogen. By the time the sirens reached Midtown, it had become an inferno, swallowing glass, steel, and 10 years of Evelyn Hart's empire in one breath. From the police transport van 2 blocks away, Julian Ward could see the orange light clawing at the sky. He'd been silent since the explosion, bruised, cuffed, eyes fixed on the flames, until one of the officers muttered, "Hart Biogen's gone. CEO's probably dead." That was all it took. Julian moved fast. One knee, one twist, one perfectly timed strike. The van veered, the driver shouted, and before the second man could draw his weapon, Julian was gone, melting into smoke and sirens. He ran. Through rain, through chaos, through the city that had turned against him. Every muscle screamed, every breath burned. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Not while she was still in there. At the edge of the fire zone, firefighters shouted orders, barricades flashing red and white. The street smelled of melted plastic and ash. Evelyn's name was on every radio. Julian slipped through the perimeter, ignoring the screams. His shirt stuck to his skin, soaked with sweat and rain. The heat hit him like a wall when he reached the front steps. "Hey, you can't go in there," a firefighter yelled. But Julian didn't hear him. He was already inside. The building was a furnace. Flames crawled along the ceiling like living things. Smoke poured from the vents, thick enough to choke the light. The glass walls that had once gleamed like mirrors were now shards, glowing red at the edges. "Evelyn!" Julian's voice was hoarse, swallowed by the roar. He moved through the corridors by instinct, retracing the path he'd memorized over weeks of working here. Every step deeper was a gamble. His vision blurred, his lungs burned. But he kept going, toward the core lab, where she'd last been seen. And then he saw her. Evelyn Hart, barefoot, coughing, trapped beneath a collapsed beam. Her white blouse was streaked with ash and blood, her hair tangled, eyes unfocused. Julian dropped beside her. "Evelyn!" She blinked, dazed, her voice cracked. How are you here?" "Long story," he said, already lifting the beam. The heat bit into his palms, but he didn't stop. With one last heave, it rolled aside, and he pulled her free. The moment she could breathe again, she pushed him back weakly. Why are you doing this? You should hate me." "I had you arrested." Julian met her gaze through the haze. "You think that matters now?" She shook her head, coughing harder. "You killed my father. You—" His voice cut through the chaos, low and raw. "Because your father saved me." Her eyes widened, the world tilting. "What?" Julian pulled her to her feet, dragging her toward the stairwell as flames devoured the walls behind them. "He knew I was set up. Marcus used me, fed me false intel, made me believe Helios was a security leak. When I found out, your father didn't turn me in. He covered my tracks and told me to disappear." Evelyn's legs faltered, her voice trembling. "That's not possible." He wouldn't. He did," Julian said, "because he believed in fixing his mistakes, not burying them. And you're the last thing he wanted destroyed." They burst through a corridor that opened into the lobby. The ceiling groaned above them. Flames fell like rain. He pushed her toward the exit, shouting, "Go!" She hesitated. "Julian, go!" he roared. She stumbled outside, collapsing onto the wet pavement as the cold air hit her lungs. Firefighters rushed toward her, but all she could see was Julian, still inside, swallowed by smoke. "Wait!" she screamed. "He's still in there!" The nearest fire captain caught her by the arm. "Ma'am, it's too dangerous. He saved my life," she cried. "You don't understand." But the words faded, drowned by the sound of another explosion deep inside the building. Inside, Julian staggered through the stairwell, one hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. His earpiece crackled. Marcus's voice, calm and venomous. "You never learn, do you?" Julian froze. "Where is she?" Marcus laughed. "Safe, for now." And then softer. "But your daughter isn't." Julian's breath caught. "What did you do?" "Insurance," Marcus said. "She's still in the building. Sublevel 2. You find her, maybe you get to live long enough to watch everything else burn." The line went dead. Julian's heart slammed against his ribs. He turned and ran, ignoring the pain, the smoke, the collapsing steel. Every second was a knife. Evelyn fought against the paramedics, trying to hold her still. "I have to go back," she shouted. "He's still in there." "Ma'am, it's suicide." She tore the oxygen mask from her face and pushed through them, running toward the building. "Then so be it." The air inside was worse now, molten, suffocating. She pulled her blazer over her mouth and followed the sound of distant alarms, her mind cutting through panic with one singular thought. Find him. Through the smoke, she heard it, a child's cry, "Daddy!" Evelyn turned the corner and froze. Lila. The little girl was trapped behind a fallen metal frame, flames closing in on all sides. Her tiny hands reached out through the bars, coughing, terrified. Evelyn didn't think. She dropped to her knees, pulling at the debris with every ounce of strength she had. "Lila, stay with me!" Julian's voice came from the darkness, rough and urgent. "Evelyn, move!" She turned just as he burst through the flames, blood streaking his face, eyes wild. Together they lifted the frame, metal screaming under pressure. "Got her!" Evelyn shouted as Julian pulled Lila free, cradling her against his chest. The girl coughed weakly, eyes fluttering. Julian's arms tightened protectively around her. "It's okay, sweetheart. I've got you. I've got you." Evelyn pressed a trembling hand to the girl's cheek, tears mixing with soot. "We need to go. Now." Julian nodded, but his gaze darted toward the corridor behind them, fire already crawling closer. "Go first," he said. "Take her. What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." But his tone, quiet, resolved, made her chest ache. She hesitated. "Julian, don't you dare! Move!" he shouted, pushing her toward the exit. Evelyn ran, carrying Lila in her arms, each breath a battle. Behind her, the world was falling apart. Walls collapsing, glass melting, the sound of the building dying echoing like thunder. When she finally stumbled outside, medics rushed forward to take the child. Evelyn turned back, scanning the inferno for any sign of him. Nothing. "Julian!" she screamed, voice breaking. "Julian!" Then, a figure, emerging through the smoke, half burned, half shadow. He staggered forward, collapsing to his knees just as she reached him. Evelyn dropped beside him, catching his face in her hands. "You're insane," she whispered, shaking. "You should have left me." He gave a faint, pained smile. "You would have done the same." She wanted to scream at him, hit him, thank him, hold him, all at once. But all she could do was press her forehead to his, the smell of smoke and blood between them. "Why do you keep saving me?" she whispered. Julian's voice was barely there. "Because I couldn't save her." Evelyn's eyes filled. "Amelia?" He nodded weakly. "I failed her once. I'm not failing again," sirens wailed louder. The medics tried to pull him away, but Evelyn clung tighter. "Stay with me, please." Julian's eyes fluttered open, gray and fading. "Get Lila out of this. Promise me." Julian, he squeezed her hand once firm. "Promise." "I promise," she whispered. And then his body went slack. For a moment the world stood still, the fire roaring behind them, rain hissing as it hit the flames. Evelyn's tears cut lines through the soot on her cheeks. "Julian," she whispered. "Don't do this." The paramedics moved in, pulling her back as they worked to stabilize him. Evelyn stumbled to her feet, shaking, watching as they carried him toward the ambulance. Lila, wrapped in a blanket nearby, reached out a trembling hand. "Is he okay?" Evelyn knelt beside her, voice breaking. "He will be." But even as she said it, she wasn't sure if she believed it. Hours later, dawn broke over a city of ash. The Hart Biogen Tower was gone, just a skeleton of glass and smoke. Evelyn stood on the edge of the wreckage, her arm bandaged, her face pale but set. In her hand, she held Julian's dog tag, burned at the edges, the name barely legible. She turned it over once, whispering to the wind, "You saved us. Now it's my turn." Behind her, the sirens faded, but the war was far from over. Marcus Hale was still out there. Clara's betrayal still hung in the air. And somewhere between loss and fury, Evelyn Hart found something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The fire had taken everything. But it had also burned away her doubt. And when she looked up at the smoke-stained sky, her voice was steady again. "This isn't the end." The night smelled of smoke and gunmetal. Sirens still echoed in the distance, the aftermath of the fire painting the city in shades of ruin. But inside the skeletal remains of Hart Biogen's South Wing, everything was silent. The kind of silence that came after too much loss. Julian Ward's breath was ragged as he moved through the wreckage, his arm bandaged, blood soaking through the fabric. He had one focus. Lila. He'd heard she'd been taken again, snatched by Marcus's men while chaos spread. It was the one thing that could drag him back from the edge of death, his daughter's voice echoing somewhere in the dark. He pushed through twisted steel and debris, his flashlight cutting thin beams through smoke. "Lila!" he called. A faint sound answered, a cough, a whimper. "Daddy?" Julian froze, his heart jolting. "I'm here, baby. Hold on." He found her huddled in the corner of a ruined corridor, wrapped in a soot-stained blanket, her oxygen tank dented but still working. He dropped to his knees, gathering her in his arms. "It's okay," he whispered, voice breaking. "I've got you." Lila clung to him, crying into his shoulder. "I was scared, I know, sweetheart." For the first time in weeks, Julian let himself breathe, until the faint click of a gun safety stopped his lungs cold. "Well," a voice drawled, smooth, venomous. "That's a touching reunion." Julian turned slowly. Marcus Hale stepped from the shadows, his suit torn, his face bloodied but still carrying that smug calm of a man who believed he'd already won. He held a gun leveled at Julian's chest. "Step away from the girl." Julian shifted Lila behind him. Let her go, Marcus. Not a chance. She's the insurance policy I should have used sooner. Julian's jaw tightened. She's a child. Marcus laughed softly. She's your child, which makes her leverage. Leverage for what? For watching you suffer. Marcus's voice hardened. You ruined everything. I built Helios from your mistakes. You think Evelyn was the genius? She just inherited her father's sins. But you're the one who made them possible. Julian's hand twitched toward his belt, where a hidden knife still hung. You talk too much. Occupational hazard. Marcus smirked. I like to see men understand what's coming before they die. He cocked the gun. Goodbye, soldier. The shot never came. A thunder crack split the air. One loud, final sound. Marcus's body jerked, his eyes going wide before he staggered back, blood blooming across his chest. The gun slipped from his hand. Behind him, through the haze of smoke, Evelyn Hart stood with her own weapon raised, both hands trembling. Her face was streaked with soot and tears, her expression caught somewhere between fury and heartbreak. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus laughed once, a wet, rattling sound. He gasped. You actually did it. Evelyn's voice was steady, but her hands shook. You hurt my family. Marcus smiled through the blood, the same cruel smirk he'd worn in boardrooms and betrayals. Your family? He coughed, crimson spilling from his mouth. You don't even know who that is. Julian pulled Lila tighter. Don't listen to him. But Marcus wasn't done. His gaze shifted between them, his grin widening, vicious even as life slipped away. You really think this man's your savior? He rasped. He was mine, my gun, my shadow. Evelyn froze. What? Marcus coughed, the last of his laughter echoing in the broken hall. Julian Ward, the perfect hitman, hired to clean up Helios, until your father realized he couldn't control his monster. Her face went pale. He's lying. Julian didn't speak. Marcus saw the silence, and his dying grin deepened. See? Even now he won't deny it. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed, a heap of blood and regret on the shattered tiles. The gun slipped from Evelyn's hands. It hit the ground with a hollow clatter. She turned toward Julian, eyes wide, wet, searching. Tell me it's not true. He held her gaze, chest heaving, blood trickling down his jaw. For a long moment, the only sound was the fire crackling somewhere above them. Finally, he spoke, voice low, tired, honest. It's true. Evelyn's breath hitched like a wound reopening. Julian took a slow step forward. Before your father met me, I was nothing. A mercenary, a trigger for hire. Marcus found me first, used me to do his dirty work. When I realized what he'd done, it was too late. Evelyn's voice was sharp, breaking. You killed for him. I did. His voice didn't waver. And I've spent every day since trying to make it right. By deceiving me? He shook his head. By saving you. She laughed, bitter and heartbroken all at once. You think that erases it? No, Julian said quietly. Nothing erases it. But you... He stopped, searching for words that didn't sound like excuses. You made me remember who I wanted to be before the world turned me into a weapon. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I trusted you, and I betrayed that, he said softly. I know. Evelyn's hand went to her mouth. She turned away, shaking, torn between fury and something deeper, that unbearable ache that came from caring about someone she couldn't forgive. Behind them, Lila stirred in Julian's arms, whispering weakly, Daddy? The sound broke Evelyn's resolve. She turned back, seeing the raw fear in his face, the exhaustion, the unspoken guilt. For all the things he'd done, all the blood he'd spilled, he was still the man who'd run through fire for her. Her voice trembled. You could have let Marcus kill me. I know. You didn't. Julian exhaled, a faint, cracked smile ghosting his lips. Maybe I'm selfish. Maybe I just needed one thing in my life worth saving. Evelyn's tears finally fell. She reached out, hesitated, then touched his face, her fingers brushing against soot and blood. You're impossible, she whispered. He closed his eyes at the touch, leaning into her hand. So are you. For a moment, the world narrowed to that single fragile contact. Her trembling hand, his exhausted heartbeat, Lila's small fingers clutching his sleeve. The fire outside still burned, but inside that ruined corridor, something quieter took its place. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. By dawn, the flames had been contained. Marcus Hale's body was taken away under a tarp. Clara's name was already circulating, the media piecing together the conspiracy, the betrayal, the cover-up. Evelyn sat beside the ambulance where Lila slept, wrapped in blankets. Her body ached. Her mind ached more. Julian stood a few feet away, bloodied but alive, giving his statement to a detective who clearly didn't believe half of it. When it was done, he turned toward her. "You should go," she said softly. "They'll arrest you again." He shrugged. "They might, but not today." A silence hung between them, the kind heavy with everything left unsaid. Finally, Evelyn stood. "When my father died, I thought redemption was for other people. Not me, not him, not anyone in our world." Julian looked at her, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe that's why it matters when it happens." She took a small step forward, her eyes searching his face. "What happens now?" Julian glanced toward the horizon, where the first light touched the city's broken skyline. "Now, you rebuild, and I disappear." Her throat tightened. "You think that's what I want?" "It's what you'll have to want," he said. "For both of us." Evelyn stared at him, memorizing the lines of his face, the scar that would never fade. "You saved me, twice," he smiled faintly. "Then I guess we're even." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Julian," he looked back, "do you believe in forgiveness?" she asked. He hesitated, then said quietly, "Only when someone's brave enough to offer it." She nodded, a single tear tracing down her cheek. "Then maybe someday." He gave a soft nod, eyes lingering on her one last time, a silent promise, a quiet farewell. Then he walked away, disappearing into the haze of dawn. Hours later, Evelyn stood alone where the building had once stood. The air still smelled of ash and memory. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. Julian's dog tag, scorched but whole. She ran her thumb over the engraved letters, whispering, "You're wrong, Julian. Some debts can't be evened." Then she slipped it around her neck, the cold metal resting against her skin. A weight, a reminder, a vow. Behind her, the sun rose through the smoke. Blood had been spilled. Truth had burned. But somewhere between ruin and redemption, Evelyn Hart had finally learned what it meant to live. Not for revenge, not for legacy, but for forgiveness. And in that fragile morning light, she knew the story wasn't ending. It was beginning again, in fire, in blood, and in the fragile human hope that even the broken could be saved.